You're listening to the Connection Care Community Podcast, a podcast designed to help you understand your body more deeply and feel more confident navigating your hormones, cycle, and fertility. Each episode offers grounded, research-informed guidance and integrative tools to support hormone health, embodied awareness, and informed choice. If you're seeking clarity, connection, and a more trusting relationship with your body, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Here's your host, the founder of Connection Care Therapy, Majida.
Hello and welcome to the Connection Care Community Podcast. My name is Majida, and today we'll be talking about trying to conceive and how syncing your cycle can help you in so many different ways, including and especially in understanding your hormonal rhythm. Because the decision to try to conceive rarely starts in a single moment. For most people, it maybe begins a little bit more gradually. A growing awareness, a quiet shift in how you're thinking about the future, a curiosity about what your body is actually doing, capable of doing, whether it's ready. And then if you run into a few bumps or hiccups, unexpected pauses in your timeline, then for many, you start to translate that curiosity into action. So for those of you who are out there who know this experience, it maybe looks like you've downloaded some apps, you've bought some ovulation predictor kits, you started some supplements, you started to research these timelines that you've always been so invested in, and the impulse that we have to do something, especially in the face of the unknown, makes complete sense. And it's important to note that conception isn't a sprint to a clearly marked timeline or a clearly marked finish line. It's a biological process that depends on rhythm and capacity and hormonal support that is oftentimes built over time. So this is where cycle syncing comes into the conversation. And I kind of want to move away from it being a quote-unquote hack of some kind to hack ovulation, but more so as a framework for supporting what may be the underlying conditions that will actually aid your fertility in unfolding. So when we align nutrition and movement and stress support and rest with our own hormonal rhythm, then we start to restore communication inside our bodies. And that communication is what conception is actually founded on. So there's a version of trying to conceive conversation that treats it almost entirely as a timing problem. The sperm meets the egg during a very narrow fertile window. And even, I've been guilty of this in teaching FAM and talking about the fertile window in a very, very specific kind of way, right? It's this time period that cervical fluid increases your fertile window and can keep sperm alive for this very specific time period. Then there's ovulation that's like a 24-hour event, and et cetera, et cetera. So it can oftentimes be framed as though the work is just about figuring out when that window opens and making sure that you're trying to conceive fun times, right? You're trying to conceive lovemaking and what have you for that specific window. However, physiologically speaking, successful conception and implantation depend on a few more things than just timing. The body needs to be ovulating consistently, right? That's the big one, which means that supported ovulation means healthy hormone levels. Then on the other end, right, we have estrogen supporting ovulation occurring, and then the corpus luteum on the other end is producing progesterone, which is going to sustain our luteal phase. So oftentimes you'll hear those of us in the fertility space talk about how estrogen can get you pregnant and progesterone will keep you pregnant. But for all of that to be doing what it needs to do, there's some other foundational things that we need to ensure that we're paying attention to, like stable blood sugar, to make sure that insulin isn't disrupting hormonal signals. We also need to ensure that our inflammation is manageable. We also need our liver and gut detoxification pathways to be doing their jobs, including clearing excess estrogen and other toxins. We also need a well-nourished, robust uterine lining. And none of these conditions are built in one single cycle. They're constructed gradually over time in how you're eating across weeks and how you move and rest across months and how your nervous system is managing stress and whether or not your body is responding to its signals or we're doing things to override those signals. And this is where I want to bring cycle syncing into the TTC, or how many myself and my students like to call your conscious conception journey, because it is a way to intentionally build those conditions. When the body experiences predictability, and what that can look like, right? We're talking about stable meals. We're talking about appropriate movement for your stage where you are at in your cycle. If you're integrating things like intermittent fasting that is cycle specific, adequate rest, reduced chronic stress, our reproductive hormonal signaling improves. That's when we see ovulation becoming more consistent and progesterone strengthening and inflammation lowering. The body gradually shifts from operating in a state of depletion or vigilance towards one of genuine surplus. And it's in that space of genuine surplus that conscious conception thrives, right? It's that shift that matters whether you're going to be trying for a month or preparing for 6 months out. So one of the most persistent misconceptions about preconception health is that it begins when you stop using a form of contraception. However, right, biology would suggest otherwise. So we know that egg quality, for example, this concept of egg quality, which I often like to frame as follicular health, right? So you have the egg, and then you have the follicle that surrounds it. And it's the support of the follicle that surrounds the egg that we're really able to support in optimizing for those 3 to 4 months prior to that ovulation where conception occurs, right? We also know that sperm on the other end, right? So the eggs on the other end take around 3 to 4 months of support and that nurturance for the follicular development, and then we have around 2.5 months, right? 3 months for the same kind of support that can happen when it comes to sperm development. So what that means is that the biological environment that you're in right now is shaping the quality of what will be available for you a few months from now. So when you start working on your cycle a little bit earlier than when you're actually open to conceive, you have some time. You have some time to build nutrient reserves, to stabilize cycle irregularities, to lower inflammation, to strengthen your resilience around stress, not by adding pressure, but by creating the consistent conditions that your body can rely on. The other benefit, and why I advocate for starting earlier, is something that goes unmentioned, but is one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world. We're talking about body literacy. Actually understanding, becoming literate, being able to read your body, right? Understanding when you actually ovulate, how stress may shift your cycle length, what your luteal phase typically looks like. That knowledge becomes absolutely invaluable when you are actively trying to conceive. It removes another layer of uncertainty that can quickly compound into anxiety when conception is the sole focus and the sole goal. I talk about this much deeper around egg and sperm development and timelines and what have you in the actual Substack that's connected to this podcast. So if you're someone who finds research grounding and supportive, the links are in my show notes. You can also go over to my Substack, which is the Connection Care Community Substack, and find a bunch more information there. And I really do offer, for you to really, if you're having anxiety around these conversations. I recently had a conversation with someone who was very anxious about whether or not they were even fertile at all because of all of the information that we get on the daily, which associates just fertility in general with infertility, right? Fertility in general, with difficulty, with pathology. And one of the things that I offer is the greatest, most profound supports that you can give, not just your body, but also your mind and your spirit, is to become body literate, right? Is to understand what this information means for your body. And one of the best ways, most profound ways, most empowering ways to start to do that is to start to track, read, map your own cycle. So one of the things, right, getting back to my notes, was off on my soapbox for a little bit. You can tell how passionate I am about this topic. But going back to my notes, one of the things that cycle syncing does is that it takes this generic conversation around preconception advice, and this generic conversation that sometimes doesn't really respect the fact that every body is different and everybody's body is different, and that our body is generally different from week to week, and that we're not actually designed to produce the same output every single day of the month. We're not machines, okay? And pretending otherwise can create great friction within our body and our biology. So one of the things that cycle syncing does is to take that entire paradigm and spin it around on its head, right? It says what your individual cycle is doing is absolutely profound and interesting, and a basis for immense curiosity, and really where we can get real about what your unique system needs. So just to quickly go through the phases, you'll probably have, if you're new here, right, this will be an introduction to cycle syncing. You can see me going into much more deep dives into other podcasts, and also on my website, connectioncaretherapy.com, I have entire articles about cycle syncing, as well as on my Substack, I have a bunch of information there. But just as a brief overview, your follicular phase is the first phase of your cycle. It starts after menstruation ends, starts the first day of menstruation and goes all the way to ovulation. However, within the follicular phase, we break up the menstrual phase because the menstrual phase has unique needs, and then the ovulatory phase because the ovulatory phase has unique needs. So there are really, I oftentimes say that there are two stages of the cycle: the follicular phase, from menstruation to ovulation, and the luteal stage from after ovulation begins until the day before your next menstrual cycle, right? However, you'll oftentimes hear about the cycle when it comes to cycle syncing talked about in 4 phases, and that's because the follicular phase is broken up into ovulation and then and menstruation and then ovulation as well. So with that, if we're talking about, we're going to start with the follicular phase after menstruation ends and estrogen is starting to rise, and oftentimes that's seen as a natural window for rebuilding, right? Under the support of estrogen, for many, not all, right? Every cycle is unique, remember that. But these are overviews so that you can start to understand what the different phases of your cycle may entail. And so because of the influence of estrogen, energy can oftentimes be more robust around this time period. For many, it can be a really good time for replenishment of iron stores post your cycle ending. For many, it can be a time where things like strength training and starting to move out in the world and do more robust socializing and what have you. This phase can oftentimes be seen as a period of renewal, where working with our energy feels very much in flow. And then ovulation, right, occurs, and for ovulation to occur, estrogen must peak. And because estrogen peaks, we can have like a pretty robust amount of energy during ovulation. That around ovulation can be a time where we see our sexual desire really increase as our fertile window opens and we move closer and closer to ovulation. And one of the things that I would offer is being aware as to the impact of overtraining on things like ovulation, pushing to exhaustion. Many can see this time of extra energy to say, like, let me do and do and do and do more, instead of it being another offering where we can say, where can we be more, like just be with ourselves and of ourselves, just be, and not be more in terms of doing more, just be more in terms of like existing with our system, right? And some of the things I offer my clients is to just see the impact of intensity, right, during 1 month versus moderation during another month. During this time, definitely, moderate movement and anti-inflammatory foods and blood sugar stability can be very supportive things to consider. If you're tracking your things like your cervical fluid and your basal body temperature, methods that I teach in what's called the fertility awareness method, to biomarkers that we talk about a lot. These are times when we see a lot of shifts and changes in those two biomarkers, and learning how to read those signs and those biomarkers again can be truly profound to understanding your fertile signs and really supporting you in optimizing your conscious conception journey when you are ready to do so. Then after ovulation, we move into the luteal phase. It's where progesterone rises. Ovulation occurs, the egg goes on this journey, and what's left behind is this temporary organ called the corpus luteum. It's super incredible. And because of what the corpus luteum is doing and the increase in progesterone, we can oftentimes see a sense of slowing down during our luteal phase. It's important to note that progesterone, in order for adequate progesterone levels to happen, adequate calories are necessary, adequate fats, adequate rest, right? These things are deeply necessary in order for progesterone to thrive. So if you're under navigating things like calorie restrictions or high intensity cardio that's being done during this time, or chronic unmanaged stress, you may notice that your progesterone levels may be impacted by those lifestyle factors. Progesterone also naturally increases insulin resistance, right, slightly, which means that blood sugar stability becomes even more important in the second half of our cycle. It's not accidental that we crave carbs, and integrating healthy carbs into your system can be really, really supportive for progesterone. Regular protein-rich meals can also make a meaningful difference in mood and stability and hormonal support during this stage. And I also offer that consistent movement that feels aligned with your body. It may look like yoga or Pilates or walks, right? These kinds of more just moderate movement routines may feel really, really good during this stage of your cycle. And then, even though menstruation actually starts our follicular phase, I'm going to talk about it at the end because it's such a robust time for so many of us. So if conception has not occurred, menstruation can be framed as a reset, right? And if conception has occurred, then of course naturally you're not going to have a menstruation, right? So let's talk about if conception hasn't occurred, and if you're actively trying to conceive. Of course, it makes sense that this time period can carry extra layers of emotional weight, and there can be a tremendous sense that the gap between what you were hoping for and what has actually happened, that gap can be significant. And so I want to name that directly and not skip over that, and allow the space for that experience rather than to force positivity or to even reframe, right? Or immediately directing into the next cycle. This acknowledgement and this integration is part of hormonal support too. Your nervous system is a deep and profound part of this process. Is why I integrate somatic work, nervous system work, hypnotherapy-based work into my clients who are navigating the conscious conception, the trying to conceive experience. It is deeply meaningful, deeply profound work to ensure that your nervous system is well supported during this time. And while menstruation is a natural reset, taking time to really support yourself in navigating and integrating whatever grief may be coming up, know that that's part of the experience too. So just to close out, a few other things that I will cover in this podcast. Fertility awareness is a powerful skill to learn as you are working to navigate your conscious conception, trying to conceive journey, and understanding, again, when your fertile window is open, what your luteal phase looks like, right? What your estrogen looks like. All of these things can be told and seen month to month on a daily basis, in fact, if you are mapping your cycle. And I do have a course where I teach this body of work. It's called the Cycle Connection. So be sure to either join my Substack or keep if you're listening to this on podcast, keep up here, subscribe, right? That's where I will announce when my next cohorts and things like that will be opening. Gotta talk a little bit about supporting detoxification. Preconception conversations have a tendency to really drift in deeply into cleanses and eliminations and all of that. One of the things that I want to offer is that that's not oftentimes what's needed, necessary, or even most supportive. And so much more can be said about that. I go into it more deeply on my Substack. I also have an entire blog article called I think if I get it right off the top of my head, Preconception Cleansing Isn't Necessary. I believe it's the name of that. Yeah, I have it right here in my notes. Preconception Cleansing Isn't Necessary. And I also, if you go to my website and you type in the Fertile Connection 40-Day Fertility Boost Detox Program, you can see a program that I've organized that supports in both gut health rehabilitation plus liver detoxification support that is gentle and nourishing instead of depleting or restricting. So much can be said about supplements, and I have entire articles on that topic, but I want to highlight just a few here. Methylated folate, right? Omega-3s, the coenzyme Q10, ensuring that you know what your vitamin D levels are as well as your iron levels, right? So make sure that you're getting preconception lab work done. Magnesium, zinc, those are two others that I talk about when talking about preconception support. If you're looking for more preconception support, I have entire preconception support bundles through my Full Script dispensary, which you can find on my website. If you just go to connectioncaretherapy.com and you type in preconception, a robust amount of information will come up. And if you need support navigating that information, definitely do reach out so that you can get more personalized support from someone who does this, like myself. So let's see, what else do we have here that I want to cover? Just continuing to engage in this conversation from the level of not requiring us in any way, shape, or form to arrive to some kind of perfect condition. Okay, I want to offer that preconception support and navigating a trying to conceive journey is about building capacity. It's about creating an internal environment that is stable, that is well resourced enough for you to have the support to achieve the goals that you are working towards. And that cycle syncing combined, right? The foundation, I think, of cycle syncing is actually understanding and mapping your cycle, which is why I advocate for fertility awareness support and body literacy when engaging in the framework of cycle syncing. And of course, right, to mention that this is not about adding any kind of pressure to what is already can be a very emotionally loaded process. It's about supporting you in having something that is concrete and clear and contained and responsive so that you can work with your own rhythm. So I'll leave it there for now. Again, please do check out my website, connectioncaretherapy.com, my Substack over at the Connection Care Community. You can find the notes, the links and what have you in the show notes. And I really do appreciate you taking time to be here. And yeah, please reach out if you have any questions. I love hearing from you all. And in the meantime, I'll see you next time, and be sure to stay connected.
That does it for this episode of the Connection Care Community Podcast with Majida. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you're leaving with a fresh perspective on your body and overall well-being, along with practical tools you can integrate into daily life. The support doesn't stop here. Be sure to connect with us online at connectioncaretherapy.com for more resources to guide you on your journey. You can also find us on Substack and connect with Majida on Instagram at Majida Sai'da. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. And most importantly, stay connected.